Penguin Audio presents Special Operations, written by W.E.B. Griffin, read by Michael Russotto.
1. Mary Elizabeth Flannery first came to the attention of the police department of the city of Philadelphia at 9:21 p.m., June 29, 1973, when an unidentified civilian called the police emergency number and reported that as she and her husband had been driving through Fairmount Park, going down Bell's Mill Road toward Chestnut Hill, they had seen a naked woman just walking around on the Chestnut Hill side of the bridge over Wissahickon Creek. The call was taken in the police radio room, which is on the second floor of the police building in downtown Philadelphia. The operator who took the call was a civilian, a temporary employee, a 22-year-old, 227-pound, 6'3" black man named Foster H. Lewis, Jr. Foster H. Lewis, Sr. was a sergeant in the 18th District. That hadn't hurt any when Foster H. Lewis, Jr. had appeared 3 years before in the city administration building across from City Hall to apply for a part-time job to help him with his tuition at Temple University, where he was then a pre-medical sophomore. Foster H. Lewis, Jr., who was perhaps predictably known as Tiny, had been at first more than a little awed by the radio room, with its rows of operators sitting before control consoles, and made more than a little uncomfortable by the steady stream of calls for help, often from people on the edge of hysteria. Alone of America's major city police forces, Philadelphia police respond to any call for help, not just to reports of crime. It is deeply embedded in the subconscious minds of Philadelphia's 2.1 million citizens — there are more than 5 million people in the Philadelphia metropolitan area — that what you do when Uncle Charlie breaks a leg or the kid falls off his bike and is bleeding pretty bad at the mouth, or when you see a naked woman just walking around in Fairmount Park, is call the cops. Tiny Lewis had worked in the radio room 2-3 nights a week and weekends, and full-time during the summers for 3 years now, and he was no longer awed by either the radio room or his responsibilities in dealing with a citizen who was calling for help. For one thing, he was reasonably sure that this citizen's call was for real, and that the citizen herself was neither hysterical or drunk, or both. "May I have your name, please, ma'am?" Tiny Lewis asked, politely. "Never mind about that," the caller snapped. "Just help that poor woman." "Ma'am, I have to have your name," Tiny Lewis said, reasonably. Sometimes that worked, and sometimes it didn't. It didn't now. The phone went dead. "Joe," Tiny Lewis called, just loud enough to catch the attention of the police dispatcher, a sworn police officer named Joe Bullock. Joe Bullock had had 16 years on the job when he pulled a drunk to the curb on the Baltimore Pike in West Philadelphia. He had him standing outside his car when another drunk had come along and rear-ended the stopped car. Neither civilian had been seriously injured, but Joe Bullock had spent 7 months in University Hospital. The department had wanted to put him out on a 32, a civil service disability pension for injuries received in the line of duty, but Bullock had appealed to the police commissioner. The police commissioner, then the Honorable Jerry Carlucci, had found time to see Officer Bullock, even though his time was pretty much taken up with his campaign to get himself elected mayor. Commissioner Carlucci only vaguely remembered Officer Bullock, when Bullock politely reminded him that he used to see him when the commissioner had been a highway sergeant. But he shook his hand warmly and assured him that as long as he was either police commissioner or mayor, the expletive-deleted paper pushers on the Civil Service Commission were not going to push out on a 32 any good cop who wanted to stay on the job and had a contribution to make. Officer Bullock was assigned to the radio division as a police dispatcher. "What have you got, Tiny?" Officer Bullock inquired of Tiny Lewis. "A naked woman in the park at Bell's Mill and Wissahickon Creek, around the Forbidden Drive," Tiny said. "I think there's something to it." "It could be some girl changed her mind at the last minute," Joe Bullock said. Forbidden Drive, despite the
Sample complete. Ready to continue?